let's do some critical thinking. This late in the evening, actually early morn, I looked some things up. I have one more too that I'm looking up right now. How are you doing? I have not I have not seen you in some time for like a real talk. How are you? I've missed you all. Okay, so let's let's see here. I'm sorry. I should have done this before I got on here, but I just remembered it. I was like, oh, I didn't look that up. Let me look that up real quick. Okay. One. Okay. So, one thing, we'll start with this, okay? Because it's like important. It's very important. Abba, preach what you guys did the other day. Dangerous. Dangerous. Um, you know, and we'll get into why in a minute. But I've already stated this, okay? Um, one, no, not everybody is narcissistic, but, and I've said this before. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again and clarify because it's so important. For instance, I've never called G a narcissist, um, because he's not. His personality is great. uh, for him specifically, mental health has layers, okay? And those layers progress as trauma progress, okay? So it starts simply with just the attachment style. And your attachment style is the initial creator of what you gravitate towards, what is brought into you, okay? If you're dismissive, whatever you fear is ultimately what's brought to you. Kind of like in Harry Potter when they had that little creature that turned into whatever they fear. Okay. As that happens, it creates more trauma. And you then progress yourself uh, in your state of mental health. So the more trauma that you experience, the more drastic your mental health gets. If we want to say that 1% of the population is narcissistic personality disordered, because there's a difference between just the personality traits and the disorder itself, let's consider some things. One, young people outnumber the amount of old people and older people, right? So, in one family, there can be 5 children that are initially affected by one narcissistic individual. So if in 1930 you had a population of only 2 billion, that number gradually grows. The most important thing to understand about narcissistic personality disorder is that their their main goal is esteem within the people. So they are not the 1% that's diagnosed is the 1% that got caught or is self-aware. If you've noticed, there's been a rise in um, commentary from people who are self-aware, like diagnosed self-aware narcissistic individuals, or diagnosed psychopathic individuals, sociopathic individuals are now becoming self-aware. if you lack the self-awareness, you would never go for help. So the number of narcissistic people, the statistic will always be faulty, because narcissistic individuals, truly narcissistic personality disordered people, do not seek help. Now, what's interesting is that all of the examples that you gave are the actual tactics of true narcissistic personality disordered people, right? So the example that they compartmentalize with their family, but they're really rude to their coworkers. It's because their family is who they choose to receive their esteem from. So that's literally what it is. It's the manipulation. Those people, the family who has never seen that side of them, will always take their back and stand for them because they have never shown that side of themselves to their family. The same can be said of pretty much any type of mental illness. There's a lot of people that have never seen me dysregulated. Reason being, well, that person doesn't trigger me. So therefore, they would never see it. But it does not take away from the disorders that I had received in the past. Um, so it's very important not to minimize people's experiences. There was something where you said someone who says that every person they dated was a narcissist. I couldn't believe it because there's only 1% of the population. So you met all, again, those people would never get mental health help. Or if they did, so for instance, for Aaron's dad, he used to tell me all the time that he was not a narcissist. And there was something that I saw earlier. Let me see if I could find it. I keep doing this. I split my research on one side, and it said that not all sociopaths and all psychopaths have narcissistic traits, but not all narcissists will be psychopaths, right? Aaron's dad is definitely like not uh, just narcissistic. And in fact, what I noticed about my relationships, like the more red flags that I wasn't aware of, the more intense the personalities got. So I wouldn't call Jeremiah's dad like psychopathic. I wouldn't call him that. But he's definitely narcissistic. And he is the rare case of someone under the age of 18 being diagnosed with it. He actually saw a therapist, but it was because he was under the care of someone. In adulthood, he has not sought therapy. Okay. That diagnosis was given to him before he was an 18-year-old, and more commonly, people aren't diagnosed before 18, even if they display the traits, um, because everyone does have narcissistic tendencies. But this is what um, is important to understand about the paradigm. The reason that so many people have narcissistic traits is what I just said. If one family is exposed to a narcissistic person, one child will definitely be narcissistic, and the rest will go on in life having adapted and what's the word? Assimilated to the narcissistic standard. So therefore, a lot of people run around here with narcissistic traits. It does not mean that a person can be borderline personality disorder and have narcissistic traits, but it doesn't make them a narcissist. And the most common thing about that would be the empathy. So, like, the level of empathy is going to determine if that person is truly narcissistic or not. Okay. So, it's like interesting because everything that you said to describe why that person would have abused you and not someone else is literally what narcissistic supply is. So, for instance, we'll use my oldest child's father as an example. Um, you actually use the exact example too, so it's kind of interesting. But um, his reasons for abusing me was because I reminded him of his mother. Um, he did experience trauma as a result of his mother. However, one very common denominator between the both of us is that we experienced extreme sexual abuse in childhood, which created a mental health disorder. In what world are you okay with someone abusing another because that person has been abused already? You know what I'm saying? Like, the only thing that parallels us is the fact that we had a similar trauma and therefore had certain emotional imbalances as a result of that. That doesn't give him the right to abuse me. It doesn't give him the right to abuse his child by keeping his child from me because of his own inability to process his trauma in regards to what his mother did. I've never traumatized my child in the same way because everybody is different. The fuck? Come on. Let's get it together. Now, I do agree with some of the sentiments in that talk piece. No, not everybody is narcissistic, but as a result of it, all it takes is one person. The game that came to mind. Okay, there's a game that the kids play. It's called Among Us. Okay, and on this ship there is an imposter among us. Okay, uh, that imposter blends in. That imposter is a chameleon. That imposter is able um, to assimilate to the standard within the ship, and therefore it begins to kill off the entire crew if you can't find them. And in some cases, I talk about it all the time too in Star Trek with the Borg. It's very similar. There's the Borg doesn't outnumber the amount of societies that there are, but eventually they try to take over the entire universe and galaxy because um, they are the imposters. They choose to make everyone assimilate to their standard. So when you have a family with the average of two children, one of those children will go on to raise their children in the same exact way. The other will possibly deviate a little bit, but it will still have tones of narcissism in it. Everyone has narcissistic personality traits, even myself. You know, I try my best to curb those, but nobody is perfect. I mean, I you are. Everybody is perfect, just the way they are. There's always room for improvement. You know what I'm saying? But everyone is worthy of love at the exact spot they're at right now. You know, so that's the most important thing. So yes, there are some people that come across abusive people um, as they move along on their journey. For every single person, though, it will be a learning experience. Yes, that person is a common denominator, so therefore they would have to work on those things to avoid bringing that in again. But of course, they have to gain that knowledge and understanding of self first. So, as I was impeded repeatedly, uh, you know, like I said, it continued to escalate. They are not all narcissists. They're not all narcissists. Um, but you know, that's it's neither here or there because not every single person in the world is narcissistic. But the 1% is definitely underestimated. It's not even underestimated. Again, that's the people that have been caught. Those are the people that are self-aware. A narcissist is never self-aware. Uh, when they're not in recovery. You know what I'm saying? But the fact that they can compartmentalize their behavior also lets you know that they know something is afoot, amiss. But their importance, their self importance, uh, excuse me, their self importance and like their need to be seen in a good light will always keep them from, not always, but a large majority will refuse mental health help because there's a stigma behind that. You know, my statements in regards to it is I'm not running from narcissists. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, um, like even like when I thought about the if you seek Amy, there were things that I addressed with her multiple times. I don't think she's like a full blown narcissist, but understand that certain narcissistic personality traits will push others away. That's just how it works. Like, if you're doing something that is affecting me, I have no choice but to, you know, essentially, step away. But the most important thing has always been trying to acknowledge those things, work on those things, uh, to support. Now, let's talk about choices because I had a wonderful conversation this evening. Let's talk about choices and decision making. Because what a lot of people want is for traumatized people without any knowledge to take accountability for their decisions. Now, if you are mentally ill, there are a number of mental illness that do have a level of inability to make decisions. Instead of people taking that compassionately, what they want to do is hard love, or, in their opinion, hard love, or try to steer them with like the tough love stuff, right? Without having any compassion for that person. Like, where does that make sense? That person does not have the cognitive ability to make a decent decision sometimes. When put under pressure, when traumatized, when triggered, this person who has been diagnosed with mental illness, uh, and the symptoms of the mental illness are the inability to make decisions. For some reason, you guys want that person to take accountability. They can't. That's what the whole point of CBT and DBT is, to retrain the brain to make those decisions, to recognize the red flags, to recognize certain things that they aren't able to do. They do not have the capacity to do it. So rather than taking you know, a compassionate stance on it, you all mental illness has a root of trauma. This is why I'm actually so passive in regards to my children's fathers, especially Aaron's dad. Aaron's dad, we had to have a conversation with. I had to have a conversation with Aaron recently, um, because he asked if his dad loves him, and not everybody understands love. What child at 9 years old that was in a war would actually be in their right mind? And why would I be like, why would I condemn that person? It doesn't matter if he is the way he is because of what he experienced as a child. Everyone has the responsibility to try to get that help, But a lot of people are not getting that help because we don't have the compassion. We just have the judgment. You know what I'm saying? Uh, we can take it any way you want to go. Any way you want to go. Okay? Person who's never used drugs will never know what it's like to be a person who's used drugs. You know what I'm saying? If my parent used drugs, or if there's any particular thing, your DNA is changed to be a predominant, like your DNA is changed to be anything different from the norm, right? When trauma is presented to your previous generation, this is generational trauma, correct? This is generational curses, correct? This is what it is. So one person will look at another person and be like, I would never use drugs. And you might not, you may not. But there's going to be factors to that. How much trauma have you experienced? How much emotional pain are you in? What are your predominants in your DNA, or predeterminants rather? What are those things? You can't. We just can't be. It's and to condone the judgment of another, regardless of what it is. Like, I don't know. I'm just different. I guess I don't know. And I'm not. I'm sure there's someone out there that may understand or hear what I'm saying here. But you never use drugs. Good for you. You know what I'm saying? Good for you. Unfortunately, as a result of multiple mental health disorders, I did. Because those mental health disorders mean that there's an issue with the wiring in your brain as a result of the brain injury that is trauma, right? When women temporarily, so many things have come to mind after that because I'm like, my mind is constantly thinking. And even then, I still haven't even said everything that I wanted to say in regards to that video, but I think you'll get the point. But one of the things I thought about as I was making my decisions, right? So, when I met Aaron's dad, I was doing my best to like determine if this person was for me. And I've mentioned this before. I took the advice of Derek Jackson. Derek Jackson, um, he had all these things that you should be checking for, blah blah blah, and I checked for him. He was doing it right. Blam, bam. That's the only, every relationship within my family, there's really not a whole lot of models for it. My parents are divorced. Why are they divorced? Because my dad had more love for me than his own wife. It's just the facts, right? So there's a lot of dysfunction there. I have no one to look to, and Derek Jackson was popping at the time. So that's the advice that I took. And as I was thinking about this think piece that was provided by Adam and Preach on, not everybody's a narcissist and we're overusing gaslight and blah, 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 I was brought to the thought of Derek Jackson and how I took his advice because I had no one else to look to. And one of the things that he would say all the time is that cheating is traumatic. It's a traumatic event. While simultaneously he was cheating on his wife. Not only that, by his advice, I was led to date someone that was truly abusive. You know what I'm saying? So they're among us. These types of people are among us. They are infiltrating the system. And then by default, we all have this like narcissistic type of way of thinking and logic. If I don't do it, you shouldn't do it. When we don't even have the same DNA, we don't even have the same predominant determinants. We don't even have the same trauma. We don't even have the same level of mental health issues. There's a lot of people out here that are saying stuff like this and have never sat down with a therapist. it kind of brings me back to the think piece you had when you said everybody needs, Gen Z thinks everybody needs therapy or something like that. And you felt that they ruled the person out because he had a lot of hobbies already, but he had never went to therapy. No, definitely, definitely, they were right, because that's how they infiltrate. I met somebody at the gym, no names, but I'm pretty certain she has a completely different side of her based on things I've seen of how she treats me specifically and how she responded to certain things, right? There's certain things like, you can kind of, you can see the I can't give too much away. I don't know who watches this. There's just certain things. Mm. And then when I did something and I watched her response to that, and it wasn't anything negative, it wasn't, what I did was not negative, but how she chose to process it. And essentially, I gave her a compliment. She went and she immediately triangulated with another individual. Immediately. Now, that other individual, I had to do some damage control. You know what I'm saying? But I automatically, but as a result of the compliment that I gave her, she now treats me better. But not necessarily, because she ended up triangulating. You see the point here? Now, I look like the bad guy and I didn't do anything wrong. I gave her a genuine compliment and she used it to tear down someone else. That person, you can already tell that person uh, is used to being on the receiving end of emotional abuse. And it's just like that. Triangulation, manipulation, those things are very common because we are all being raised by like someone who was raised by a narcissist and they have like heavy narcissistic traits, or they are outright a narcissist. It's only a cycle. If you had as the population doubles, okay, it doubles, okay, it's now tripled since 1930. Um, all the older generation, the majority of them are mentally ill, but they just always had the grin and bear it type of mantra to these disorders. They don't even think mental illness is real. You know what I'm saying? So some of us fall in between that as we fall in between those generations. It's all that is. But real quick, what it is you just really have to have compassion for people no matter what. Understanding that um, there is no wrong or right choice, only what's best for you at the moment with your current understanding, knowledge, and ability. Unfortunately for some, it could land them in jail or harm, but regardless, all choices are subject to scrutiny by the collective and their own personal convictions. Okay, one cannot always be swayed by that, especially if there are no facts to back. Okay, but uh, the difference between myself and you sometimes will literally lie in the fact that I understand that and I'm compassionate regardless of what they did. You know, I'm constantly sitting here not only apologizing for my own wrongs towards my child's fathers, um, but also in forgiveness of theirs. For some of my family members, The only thing that they did wrong was just judge me. That's not our job to do, but nonetheless, the scrutiny always comes because there's always someone that is, as a result of this narcissistic paradigm, everyone is afraid to be wrong. They want to look and appear perfect. It's very simple. I mean, it may I may not be explaining it correctly. I mean, of course, it is 1 a.m. and I didn't write it down first. I had like an idea of what I wanted to say, but you know, the most common narcissistic trait that we all have, my belief, is emotional rape. So, myself personally, I've said I've been emotionally raped, but I didn't say that every single person that did it was narcissistic. No. It is the most common thing that we all do, especially when, oh, that's so funny. That's so wild. Especially when those laws that protected us from doing that were removed. You know, in the countries where those laws remain, there's better health care for people. There's lower birth rates for the people. Um, there's a lot of differences in uh, societies where that's not allowed. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have other tactics, but at least in America, in the northern hemisphere, uh, that's definitely a thing. So, you know, again, there's different levels to every mental illness. Not every single person is completely mentally ill. They may just have like an attachment style that's altered. They may only have depression. Um, oh gosh, I had so much other stuff to say. I should have wrote this shit down. Really, I do better than that. I used to be good at that, but now my life is a lot different than then. It's a lot different than then. So much different. But anyway, the presence of comorbidity, comorbidity, the presence of comorbidity. So you can have depression, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, um, PTSD, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia. You can have all that in one person. You know what I'm saying? So some people, you know, they just have narcissistic traits and they aren't necessarily mentally ill. It's simply like the level of dysfunction. You know what I'm saying? That's really all I'm saying. I'm not saying that every person in the world is narcissistic. What I'm saying is that every single person in the world has narcissistic traits as a result of cycles and generations of trauma by narcissistic people. It only takes one to destroy like many people. Many they're from their attachment style to their ability to critically think, um, to their actual personality disorder. That's all I'm saying here. And it's up to each person to determine how much of it they can handle. Uh, you know what I'm saying? And then what I also said was when you have a large amount of people um, doing the work of a narcissist, because I think that's something that you, I can tell that you've probably never really encountered a narcissist, or if you did, that you fell victim to them because you lack the understanding of how they work. So, narcissists have something which is not clinically defined, right? You're not going to go to a therapist and a therapist say, oh, yeah, you're flying monkeys. No, these are things that have been noted by psychiatrists, but aren't necessarily psychology speak, psychiatry speak. So, narcissists tend to work in packs. They want to be considered the alpha of any pack. They could never be the omega. Um, and they lead these people to sometimes terrorize their victim, therefore leaving their hands clean. In order for those people to function that way, they have to be already, their boundaries have to already be eroded by another narcissistic individual, or they themselves have to be narcissistic. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have the personality disorder, just that they have a heavy prevalence of the traits. So, their belief systems essentially align with that narcissist, as a result of their own upbringing or their own experiences. So, therefore, they are more agreeable to attack a person. And when these people are attacking this person, the main narcissist is receiving their validation. They're receiving like all of the things that they need to feel good. They feel love by having these people essentially do work for them, right? Their loyalty is proven to them by the level that they will go to please them by harming their victim. Okay, so um, I continue to use my oldest child's father, um, but I haven't even used Natty's father for this, but we're gonna do it because I recognize it, right? So if he, one of the things that he would do, and I didn't even realize it until later, but he would like text me maybe the day before, 2 days before, and say that he was going to pick my daughter up early. You know what I'm saying? Now, eventually, I saw what was happening, but initially I didn't. He would say he was going to pick her up at 5:30, make sure she's ready, and then he would show up at 6:30. Now, 6:30 is 30 minutes past the normal time anyway. The normal time is 6. So if he says he's picking up her at 5:30 and have her ready, that means he's picking her up a half hour early. But he would show up a half hour late. But he would do this specifically when he was with his girlfriend. So I would be obviously agitated. Okay. I don't know if they're girlfriend or boyfriend or not. I don't know. I don't know their titles and all that stuff. Just he was with another woman. I'm obviously agitated. Now, she has not seen that he's done this. He just tells her, I don't know why she's jealous of you. I don't know what he's saying, but this could be a possibility, right? Because this only happened when she came up. I don't know what these people talk about. But he could very well say, she's jealous of you. Look how she's acting. I'm allowed to get her at 6:30. He did not tell her that he told me he would pick her up at 5:30. So now every single time she comes around, it looks like I'm agitated that he brought this girl to my home when that's not even really what's happening. Right? So then she goes to work and she tells other people about how jealous I am of her. She knows nothing of it. This is triangulation. This is the manipulation. Now, all these people are mad at me for something that's never happened. This is how easy that can happen, and you would know nothing of it because you do not see the manipulation or the signs, and you don't even, like, a red flag doesn't even come up to you. You just see that somebody's angry. It must mean that they're jealous. You know what I'm saying? These types of things. Um, the only reason that I know it to be the case that that's possibly what happened is there was a very specific conversation between myself and my mother where she brought the lady up. And I'm like, I don't know why that would be the case because I've never even talked to her in my life. You understand? Do you understand here? Um, so those are things that we don't look out for because we don't have the knowledge. So it is very easy for someone to constantly come into contact with people because that would be their algorithm. It's not that hard. Now, does that mean that there's something about myself that I need to change? Yes and no. Those things have already changed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have a borderline personality disorder diagnosis anymore. I healed that. I do not have a bipolar diagnosis anymore. I healed that. Like, I'm in a constant state of healing. But there are people who condone continuing to hurt me for ever having a diagnosis. Like, what sense does that make? Oh my God, you're mentally ill. Um, all mental illness is caused by trauma. So is it my fault I'm mentally ill? Let's continue to traumatize you until you get the point. Like, that doesn't even make any sense. That would only mean that I would continue to be ill or build resilience to it, which to some extent I have, but I still have PTSD diagnosis. Why? Because the trauma has not stopped. But at this point, I now am much better at coping and have not escalated back into other. I've been steady. Uh, you know, 2020, like November, December 2020, uh, that's when those other diagnoses were removed. And we are now in 2023. So I've been stable. And one thing that people also don't seem to understand is that um, some mental illness will be permanent. In the Native American culture, there is a term for a person whose soul has been um, broken in a way in which they will never recover. They call them like adult children, the emotional immaturity, you know, right? So like some people may not fully recover from trauma. I think I made a statement before where I said like I do believe that autism can be healed. I don't mean that for every case, by the way. Like, and to some degree I do. Um, Essentially, where your doctor found you is not where you are left at. But it does not mean that every single thing will just be that way, right? There are people who have been told they will be nonverbal and they speak a little bit. They have 8 words. You know what I'm saying? There's some people who are told they will never walk again and they may be in a wheelchair part time, but they do actually have a level of mobility again. All of these things are determined by your own ability uh, and your own will and the support of the people around you. You know what I'm saying? The more support you have around you, uh, the more likely you are to make some type of changes within your ability. Sometimes you will not have that support around you, and you will still find a way to make those changes in your ability, you know? So everybody has the ability to change. And one thing we have to, you know, be understanding of where everybody's ability is. It's but it's up to you to determine how much that is, and that's why uh, life is so hard for some, because some refuse to see that. I can talk like this all the time. Clearly, some people do not want to see that. They don't want to accept it. It's not really my problem, is it? um, I do see my life being more fulfilling in the near future as I continue on my own path. But these are things that one should consider. My personal opinion. Have a good evening.